Was the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who just addressed the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. He emphasized on people-to-people ties and asserted on how India would be going forward with ease of doing business in the country. He also asserted on how India has a very big heart. He further said that India and US government have done their bit and they will continue to create a better and business-friendly environment. While US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that Prime Minister Modi's visit to the United States of America was a historic visit. And he also laid a lot of emphasis on the education sector and the people-to-people ties between New Delhi and Washington, D.C. For more on this, we have with us our correspondent Molly Gambhir, who's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Hi Molly. Now the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken outlined a slew of deals that were signed. It does look like New Delhi and Washington have pledged cooperation on areas including space, AI, quantum computing and also the defense sector.
Right, and just like the American president put it earlier, the number of agreements, deals and the areas where the two sides have convergence of interest, just showing how comprehensive this relationship really has become and how it has evolved over the past decade. Look at how trade has substantially gone up, in fact doubling over the past decade. Look at the way the two sides are strengthening their defense cooperation, and which is going to propel the strategic partnership between the two countries as well. But people-to-people ties being a very crucial aspect of the Indian Prime Minister's visit here to the United States as well. And the larger message that has gone out from both the Indian and the American side is that this partnership is going to be defining the 21st century. Those were the words also used by the US President Joe Biden earlier. The Indian Prime Minister also laying emphasis on how the potential that the two sides have for increasing their cooperation in the tech space has no limits. And the US president also talking about how tech cooperation is a big part of the Indian Prime Minister's visit here. Just look at the ways in which the two sides have come together, be it ISET, be it the deal to jointly manufacture jet engines, which would put India in that exclusive club of countries to be able to master jet engine technology. Beyond that, we have the two sides cooperating as far as lifting of barriers is concerned as well. The Indian Prime Minister meeting business leaders and delegates and addressing them here at the Kennedy Center as well. We've seen some very crucial statements being made by the Indian Prime Minister, recognizing the potential that business-to-business ties really have between India and the United States, and how it is important to look at this as a way to also push the partnership forward. We will now have the Indian Prime Minister in just a short while addressing members of the Indian diaspora who have been very excited to listen in from the leader. We've seen the Indian American community both in New York and Washington, D.C. also leaving no stone unturned to welcome the leader. We've been talking to a number of them, in fact, who have talked about how they have been looking forward to listening into the Prime Minister, to be able to catch a glimpse of him, and for them just how historic this moment really is. Historic it is, after all. It is the Prime Minister's maiden state visit to the United States. The very fact that this is not the very fact that this is a state visit sets it apart from the earlier visits, because this is the highest ranking diplomatic visit. It's the highest expression of friendly bilateral ties, and the two sides have made it clear that they are going to be pushing forward also in the area of ensuring a free and open Indo-Pacific, because America does realize the potential that India has when it comes to helping the US counter China, also diversifying supply chains and weaning them off from China. That's something that America has on its wish list, and India can be a reliable partner on that front as well.
Right, Molly. Prime Minister Modi also asserted on how the relations between New Delhi and Washington is not of convenience, but rather of conviction. We also have with us our correspondent Susan Tharani joining us live from New York. Hi, Susan. We just heard Blinken and Modi address the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. There was a lot of emphasis on people-to-people ties and also on the robust partnership between New Delhi and the United States of America. Tell us more.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like the two sides are more on the same page than ever before, although there are just some minor issues, and those are here in the United States, at least when it comes to the defense partnership and the sharing of technology that needs to be ironed out. But other than that, really, since the Clinton administration, and then really we saw during the Bush administration, U.S. presidents have really made an effort to try to bring India closer to the West and closer to the United States. And I think we see the culmination of that happening right now with President Biden and Prime Minister Modi, because it's in the strategic interest of both countries at this point. They have more similarities and more concerns in common than differences. And I think we see that really in speeches not only by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, of course, President Biden as well, but also business leaders here in the United States that are watching very carefully how this relationship develops, what the rules and regulations here are in the United States and in India as well. Remember, regarding trade, India has agreed to lift some tariffs on U.S. goods, considering the fact that the United States is India's biggest trading partner. And so they're watching very closely the Chamber of Commerce and whatnot to see how this relationship develops and how far the field is and how far they can go in building economic and trade ties. So yes, the people to people is very important culturally and in the society, with Indian Americans really contributing here in the United States. But then you really have those big companies, business leaders that are looking to diversify their businesses and their companies. And of course, the supply chain issue that we had and we witnessed during COVID, for that to never happen again. So it's very noteworthy. I'd like to see what comes out of statements we hear about the meeting with, big executives. We did hear about Elon Musk, but then the other executives that talked to Prime Minister Modi, it'll be interesting to see how far their conversations went as well.
Absolutely, Susan. Also, Molly, talk to us about how the Indian Prime Minister said that India is going through an unprecedented reforming period. He further urged various American companies to invest in India.
Well, the meetings with the business leaders here in Washington, D.C., also in New York, being one of the most important aspects of the Indian Prime Minister's visit here, given the emphasis that he has been laying on the Make in India initiative. After all, America and American businesses do view India as a lucrative destination, given the growing clout that it has. Also, given that it is a crucial market to watch out for. The meetings with the American CEOs and the delegates, and also the address to them by the Indian Prime Minister, sending out a message that India is positioning itself on the global map and is ready for those investments. But also, the fact that we have such a huge participation of these American business delegates and CEOs, a lot of optics on that front as well, and the symbolism that comes with that, because it does send out a strong message on part of India and the United States as well, of them coming together to forge closer business-to-business ties, which has been a key focus area in the run-up to the Indian Prime Minister's visit as well. We've seen those statements coming in from the American officials, talking about how this is going to be a springboard to touch new horizons on that front. Also how they are going to be setting new benchmarks in defense industrial cooperation. But business-to-business ties being one of the elements that has been talked about at length also in the conversations that we've been having with the foreign policy analysts here in Washington, D.C. and also earlier in New York, who have talked about how it's a very interesting time for the India-US relationship, given the scope that businesses in both the countries really have to build a bridge and work closer together.
Right, Molly. We also have with us our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibal. Siddhant, what were some of the key outcomes of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's speech, his latest speech that he just delivered?
Well, the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in his latest address by the President on the News, talked about India and India-US relationship, where the partnership is going forward. But remember, this relationship is based on the Indian diaspora, the members of the Indian diaspora, and the next and the last event of the Indian Prime Minister will be the address to the diaspora. I'm surrounded by members of the Indian diaspora here at the Royal Center. Sir, welcome to WION. I'd like to speak to you. If you can come closer to me, how do you see the Prime Minister's visit to the United States?
It is a very important visit. This is going to bring more stronger relationships between India and US in terms of technology, AI, and defense. So this is a very good visit, and we were here at the White House yesterday, and it was an amazing. It's an amazing partnership.
Amazing partnership is the world. We saw at the White House, at the South Lawn, large number of members of the Indian American diaspora. Sir, your view about the diaspora event, what do you expect for the Prime Minister's address?
Contributions that the Indian diaspora towards the growth of India, and how the two biggest democracies in the world come together and do good for the world, and how to take it forward for the next decades is something very important that's going to be coming out of the partnership. Many deals are going to be inked, but more important is how these two democracies
take the region and the world and the most India's place at the world. I would like to have some of the ladies at the time if you can come here. How do you see India and Prime
He's a great person, and whatever he's doing, not only doing for our generation, but he's doing for the next generation. Our kids are learning a lot from him. And he has his goal, has his business, and we all support him. Like whatever he says, he does it and he shows it.
Does it and shows it? Last word to you, ma'am, if you can come from the here and talk about the members of the Indian diaspora. Your side here. You're wearing the sari. If you go around Washington, you don't see that. How are you spending then you can come closer and speak to us? Ma'am, come closer. Okay. So a lot of Gujaratis are also present here, but essentially the message is clear. Happy faces and all these happy faces need to welcome the Indian Prime Minister. Shortly, he is going to arrive here and is going to address the diaspora.
Right, Siddhant, that's quite a lot of excitement out there. We are also waiting for Prime Minister Modi's visit, attending the Indian diaspora event out there. I would now come to our correspondent Susan Tharani. Susan, how do you assess the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit, encouraging more American firms to invest in India as it looks to reduce its reliance on China for manufacturing-related activities?
Yeah, that's a very important aspect of this visit for the United States and for India as well, considering the fact that there are so many avenues that India and the United States can cooperate on at this point. And also the issue of, for example, semiconductors, or if it's the issue of solar power systems. You know, a lot of these products are coming from China to the United States. And that's something that has made Americans very weary. American companies have often been criticized for doing business in China, but they haven't had another outlet to expand and diversify. And, you know, as Molly and Siddhant have mentioned, this is a very unique opportunity right now that both countries have, that they're open to perhaps reaching a compromise when it comes to trade, because each country, as you know, ultimately has its own rules and regulations. And that has been, in part, largely one of the main reasons that this expansion hasn't happened sooner. But it seems like when there is a will, there is a way, as they say, and now is that time. American companies are looking to expand in India, many because the talent and the know-how of the technology that they're looking for is in India. As Prime Minister Modi noted, that while it's an ancient country, it has a very youthful population. And so the youth in India is very important, not only for Americans, American businesses, but also for that sort of, people-to-people relations that we've talked about. And I think that we're going to see a lot of that happening. So it's not just the visa issue that, for example, they've talked about. It's also diversifying the workforce and the supply chain as well. And I think that's where India really comes in for these companies.
Absolutely, Susan. Coming to you, Molly. Now, just a short while ago, US President Joe Biden gifted a T-shirt to Modi with a quote which says, "Future is AI," which on one hand also means artificial intelligence, but also means that future is America and India. Talk to us more on that as New Delhi and Washington take their friendships to a greater height with Prime Minister Modi's historic visit to Washington, D.C.
Right. Just look at the way the India-US relationship really has evolved, and the opportunities and the challenges that have come along this journey, and the milestones that have been achieved, and the many that lie ahead. And it's always been a smooth sailing relationship, of course. There have been friction points, and there will be friction points, and that's something that even the foreign policy analysts we've been speaking to point out, that India and the US have realized that they are trusted, reliable partners for each other. At the same
Right, there's some technical glitch out there. I would now go across to our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibal, who's joining us live from the venue where Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi would be arriving. Siddhant, talk to us about what is the mood like on the ground. You're right there. Talk to us about how the Indian community there are excited for the Indian Prime Minister's arrival.
Well, they're super excited. We just spoke to many of them, and they clearly want to meet Prime Minister Modi. They want to greet him. They want to warmly welcome him. There are almost 4 million members of the Indian American diaspora, and they play an important role in terms of the communities, in terms of the policymakers as well. Now, if we talk about the administration, the Biden administration, it has a number of Indian Americans. In fact, the Vice President, Kamala Harris, is an Indian American. She is someone who has a family, has strong linkages with India, something that she talks about. In fact, the Indian Prime Minister, during his address at the U.S. Capitol building at the U.S. Congress, talked about her and how the Indian diaspora has been playing an important role in strengthening the relationship. Now, we know that all through the visit, there have been hard diplomacy in terms of defense, in terms of critical technologies, in terms of how both countries see each other in long-term as a long-term partners. But a substantive portion of this was celebration of the relationship through the Indian-American diaspora. We were at the South Lawns of the White House, and this is something that I've never seen there at the White House. The entire area, entire White House reverberating with the chants of the Indian American diaspora. Then, of course, we saw the Capitol building as well, while the Indian Prime Minister came to address the U.S. Congress. The Capitol building was reverberating with the Indian Americans, and now, of course, the last event of the Indian Prime Minister's visit to U.S. A very, very packed visit, a very long visit, but a visit full of outcomes. This visit will be seen as a milestone in terms of India-US relationship, how essentially this was a visible manifestation of how the American policymakers see the Indian side, the Indian Prime Minister, there were comments we all know, especially by the former US President Barack Obama. But it looks like reality only strikes policymakers when they are in the hot seat, when they are ruling the country, and that shows that how they see India as a country that is important for the global stability and a country whose rise is a peaceful rise, unlike, of course, India's neighbor, that's China.
Right, Siddhant, also talk to us about how defense sector has been one of the dominating topics in Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Washington, D.C.
Well, defense, essentially, I would put it like this, that it was the showstopper focus area during the visit of the Indian Prime Minister, which is still underway. We saw announcements ranging from drones to basically the manufacturing of jet engines, Indian personnel, liaison officers in US assets, which is another significant step forward. Both countries are working towards other foundational agreements, essentially, and how both countries are keen on co-production. Now, co-production has become a buzzword during the visit. We know that India is keen on more local manufacturing in India, Make in India defense has been a priority. Yes, it has its own shortcomings, but the Indian government is leaving no stone unturned in terms of bringing investments in the country from across the world. And we saw that as well. The Indian Prime Minister meeting various investors. Earlier today, he met Google's, in fact, Alphabet's Sundar Pichai and other top CEOs as well. So the focus is to roll out the red carpet, whether it's general investment or investment for the defense sector.
Right, Siddhant. I would also now go across to our correspondent, Susan Therani. Susan...